write down all the tasks, rank them in those 4 areas: time, how delegatable is it, what does it do to your energy level, and then how much is it costing you or costing the business to be able to do that task. And so the first thing that we have people to do is go back to their calendar and set an hour free and clear. And I know it sounds overly simplistic, but the thing I cannot stress enough, Spencer, it's amazing what happens when we block an hour. Cal Newport's got a whole movement on this in his deep workbook. And so when we block that time and really drill down, then what happens with that is it's very mechanical at that point.
Hey listeners, I want to give you a quick summary of this episode, but before I do that, I've got a promo code that's going to help you out. Many of you know on this podcast, I have been the guinea pig for several different things. I've asked lots of different experts, I've tried software tools, and I've presented it to you, and I've done it in a way that I'm not an affiliate or getting compensated. So I want to tell you about my podcast host, the host that I love, and that's Libsyn. And I've tried SoundCloud, I've tried Podbeam, I've tried so many others, but the people at Libsyn have just been the best. And because of my support for them and they're supporting our community, I have a special promo code to give you your first month free of podcasting. And in fact, the day that you sign up, you get the rest of that month. So you could almost get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Use the promo code PODKICK. I do have an affiliate account with them and I get paid, but all of the money that I get paid is going back to charity. So none of it's coming to me. It's all to support the community. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So in this episode with Scott Beebe, we're going to be talking about creating the systems, the processes that will help your business flourish. And honestly, we get into some pretty heavy stuff. Some of the times when a business owner decides that they don't want to do their business anymore, maybe their vision changes, we'll talk about what to do around there. You're going to learn a ton of things, so let's jump into this interview with Scott giving us a background about who he is, what he does, and then we're going to jump into the delegation roadmap.
I'm a husband of just a little over 20 years. Ashley and I have been married, and I'm a dad. We've got, at the time of this recording, a 17, 15, and 13-year-old. So you do the math and figure out what stage of life we're in and what stage of life we're about to get into. And and so we're heavily focused on that right now. We live in the low country of South Carolina. I've been here for about 10 or 11 years, 11 years, I guess now, and just absolutely love it. South Carolina is my adopted home state. My wife is from the upstate, and we both graduated from the flagship university here. There's a secondary university up in the upstate. It starts with a C, but we don't really like to talk about that much. And what we do all day long, in fact, the day of this recording is a Monday. It's my favorite day of the week because it's the first day that we get to wake up and liberate small business owners from their chaos. And so that's a little bit about who we are and what we love to do.
Okay, awesome. You know what? It's kind of cool because Monday is my favorite day of the week as well. Because it's like you jump out of bed, and as a business owner, it's the day that you're refreshed, because I believe in a Sabbath, meaning taking a Sunday off. And then I get Monday morning and it's like, cool. It's like I'm just unleashed. It's like a bull in a china shop. It's my favorite.
I love it.
So there's a reason why you and I feel that way. And I would say it goes back to the vision, the way that we see our businesses. And there's a lot of people, most of the working class, have a case of the Mondays. And a lot of business owners, if their business is in alignment, they don't really want to be coming into work and dealing with their employees and all this stuff. So what is it about vision that causes that? Help us get to that foundation.
Yeah. There's some principal foundation things, Spencer, that I think are important around the idea of vision. Because there's a bit of a misconception about vision that I think we assume, I don't know that it's verbalized, but we assume that vision is a very modern thought. It's kind of, modern corporate thinking, or Peter Drucker came up with it, or Jim Collins, great, whatever. The reality is that vision is just superbly ancient. It is really, really thousands of years old, the idea. In fact, depending on your faith background, the reality of vision had to exist before the world existed, or else the world wouldn't exist. And so we could walk down that lane of philosophy for a long time, but more kind of concretely documented couple of thousand years ago, there's a great Jewish quote. It says, write the vision down so that those who read it may run. Write the vision down so that those who read it may run. Now, there's value principle in all that. Number one is just the fact that there's articulated vision. The second, that it's actually physically written down. There's huge value in that. And so when we say articulate a vision, the only loose, I guess the only loose word, if A is a word, would be the A in the middle of articulate and vision. Because articulation is as powerful as the vision itself. Because if there was a vision with no articulation, then there's chaos that kind of ensues. But if there's articulation of not a clear vision, that same chaos begins to overrun like a weed. And so having the impetus to sit down as a business owner to articulate vision, what it does is it breeds and lends itself to counteract another statement that says, where there is no vision, people scatter. And so if we articulate a vision, what we do is we cause people to have unity rather than to have these divisive scatterings.
Okay. So how do we get a lot more concrete? Because I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a second. A lot of the time, business owners that are starting out or that are really struggling, so call it sub 100,000 a year, they're gravitating towards their law of attraction stuff or focusing on vision and all these esoteric things, whereas business owners that are actually generating revenue almost feel a disdain for this vision, yet know that it's important. So how can we get a little bit more concrete instead of the esoteric world?
Yeah. So the other challenge of a vision is the reality that a lot of vision gets written, but then never gets followed through. And so we've been put in a bit of a kind of a bias against vision or mission or values, and we see them more as corporate speak than we do as leverage tools to be able to use to push our business forward and to serve people. And it's unfortunate. And so to make it really concrete, we've laid out 7 categories that you can think through when you're drafting your vision story. The first category is the term. How far out is your vision? The second category is your family and freedom. And so this is usually where I start to lose people and they go, well, Scott, I thought this was a business vision. It is. You can't segment family and your own personal freedom from your business. So it's that statement that grates me, Spencer, when people say, well, Scott, it's just business. It's just business. No. It's as long as there's a common humanity and emotion, nothing is just business. And so writing down, what do you see for your family in that 3-year period of time? What do you see for your own personal freedom in that 3-year period of time? And Spencer, I think you're a good case study on that, what it looks like to actually lay that out and live by that year after year. And so the term, how far out? What does your personal family and freedom look like in that term? And then your finances, starting with profit, not revenue, because your profit is really, a lot of people have revenue in the boat, but there's a lot of leaks in the boat. And when they get done at the end of the year, there's no profit remaining. And so we need to know, what profit do you need in order to fund that family and freedom in that amount of time? So those are the first 3 categories: term, family, freedom, and profit. Any questions or thoughts around that so far, Spencer?
No, I think, the term itself, is pretty self-explanatory. Family and freedom, that's one I've often heard people, when they say it's just business, one of the, I should call it, things that kind of annoys me when I hear that is it's often someone calculating and not showing their integrity when they're doing that. You know what I mean? Or at the mercy of sacrificing their family because they're trying to gain more wealth, yet they don't really have the business model or the whatever it could be to create that. So I think you're pretty spot on there.
Yeah. All right. So the 4th category, when you think about this, so the term, family and freedom, then you got your finances. Then we want to look at the product or service that you're actually going to put out to the world and lay out, what do you do existing and what do you want to do within that 3-year period in terms of products and services? Because when we write that out, now we can start to see the finances that I wanted in terms of profit. Are those products and services going to get me there? And then you start to move into tweak mode and you're moving stuff around. The 5th category is the team, the personnel. I'm going to write out who I'm going to need in order to deliver that product and service, to get to that level of finances, to serve that family and freedom section in that amount of time. So they're starting to build on each other. It's a 5th category. Of course, 6th category has got to be your client type. Who do you want to serve And maybe even more important, who do you not want to serve? Who do you not fit and well-placed to be able to serve? Each of us has been given a real unique gift to serve people. And so we need to make sure that there are people out there who we just can't serve. We're not going to be able to have the capacity to do that. And then the final section, maybe the most important, and that's the culture section. And so just a reminder that culture is not, it's kind of an amoebic term. It's a very biological term. And essentially what you put in the dish is what's going to grow out of the dish. And so if you put, dissension and gossip and frustration and lack of process in the dish, well, that's what's going to grow out. And so when you get frustrated with the culture, you really have to look kind of back at yourself and go, okay, what ingredients have I allowed to be put in the dish? Because that's what's growing out of the dish. So those 7 categories there, if you can get started with those and start to write out bullet points or a narrative under each one, it shouldn't take you that long, maybe just an hour or two, to really get a good lay of the land of what your vision looks like. I promise you'll have a level of clarity that you don't currently have.
Up next, you're going to hear about the delegation roadmap. This is what Scott's created to be able to eliminate distractions, to be able to push people past the point of being stuck so that you can get started and you can really get the momentum you need. Let's jump into that part. So when you're meeting with business owners, and just so our audience has some context, the majority of people that Scott is talking with are business owners in the 1.5 million range. And so that could be, a business that's thriving. It's doing $500,000 a year and it's on trajectory to $1.5 million. Or it could be someone that's maybe a little over $1.5 million. I'm not going to put Scott in a box, but it's just so we understand the ballpark that you're in. What's the most common area that people get stuck on out of those 7?
Honestly, Spencer, categorically, it's probably going to be the finances, because usually they've never thought about profit in the lead with revenue behind. But I'll back up even more. What they mainly get stuck with is never starting. And so there is a wisdom saying that says that dreams come with busyness, but fools' voices are a lot of words. Dreams come with busyness, but fools' voices are a lot of words. In other words, if you want to have a vision, it's going to require work. And I forget who made this statement at some point. Said something to the effect of opportunity comes dressed in overalls and looks a lot like work. And so being able to articulate the vision, most people get stuck on just sitting down and writing the vision. And so that's what I want to encourage people to do, is to say, hey, I want you to write the vision down. I want you to block the time. Well, Scott, I don't have the time. You're right. You're going to have to make it. And so the first step is to go to your calendar and set aside 1 hour. And then the second step is to take these phones and devices and notifications and turn them off. Turn them off. And then you begin to move forward from there. So that's usually where people get stuck.
Now, if someone has taken the effort to do that and they've written it out, obviously the next piece is to start to implement it. And one of the common problems is that people often aren't organized enough to be able to do it. They might not know where to start, or they might not have people to delegate to. Is that kind of what you find to be one of the major roadblocks?
Yeah, typically they get in their own mind, well, if I identify all this stuff, if I lay this vision out, who's going to help me run towards this? Because I can't uphold all of this stuff by myself. And that's what leads into what we call the delegation roadmap. Because in order to get clarity on things, we've got to be able to see them out front. Before a doctor can make any sort of prognosis, they have to make a diagnosis. And so they have to look through the common situation and say, okay, here's what's going on. Now I can prognosticate and go, okay, here's what we need to do for that. But they've got to get lab work. They've got to see numbers. They've got to see this stuff laid out. A good mechanic is not just going to catch you on the phone and go, oh, it's knocking and it's pinging. No, they want to see the vehicle. And they want to open the hood of the vehicle. They want to look inside the vehicle. And so if you want to begin to delegate items off of your list, you've got to be able to see everything that's on your list. And so this delegation roadmap, which makes it so, so powerful, is to be able to write down every single item in list format that you currently do in your role. And that's everything. If you take out the trash, it needs to be written down. If you do bank reconciliations, it needs to be written down. If you make sales calls, write it down. Everything that you write down. And then we begin to rank those 4 ways. How delegatable is it? 1, 2, or 3. How much energy does it give or suck away? Up arrow, sideways arrow, down arrow. And then how much time does it take in minutes per week? And write that down. Is it 60 minutes a week, 120 minutes a week? It's very sobering when you see it. The most powerful and most sobering moment, though, Spencer, is when somebody looks at that task, sees how much time it takes, and then multiplies it by 200. $200 per hour is the minimum billable time rate that a business owner's time is worth. And so when you realize that you're taking 60 minutes a week to make bank runs or whatever, doing really simplistic work, and realize that it's costing you $200 and $400 and $800 and $1,200 a week to do these simple tasks, then you start to have the aha moments to go, wait a second, I can delegate that. I can get that to somebody, and somebody really well paid to be able to take that task on, and will probably do it better and with more enthusiasm than I'll do it myself.
Okay, so when you're taking business owners through that, is the objective that they're trying to get to limit the amount of time that they have to put in their business, or is it to make it so that they're making more money? What are the trajectories that they're usually going towards?
Yeah. So there's, I believe there's stated goals, and then there's the real goals. The stated goals are more time, more money, more whatever. The reality of it is they want to be able to wake up on Monday and be excited about what they're going into. At the end of the day, they want to have something that's got legacy. It's got something that lasts beyond them. They want to have something where if they could go to Puerto Rico, or they could go to Italy, or they could go somewhere for a period of time, that the business wouldn't just run, it wouldn't just sustain, but it would actually grow. That's what most people are going for. What I've found, Spencer, is most people don't want a $10 million company or a $50 million company or a $100 million company, because once they see a little bit of growth, they realize that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. So the statement is true. To whom much has been given, much is required. And there are a lot of people that they'll get to 2 million and go, I don't want to do any more revenue. What I want to do is I want to increase the bottom line, and I want to be generous with not only the money, but with the roles in the business. And I want to start doing things that have real meaning and real purpose outside of the day-to-day. And so that's where I've found most people's unstated goals are, but their stated goals come across as more profit, more time, better employees, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you make a good point. In a previous episode, I talked with Patrick Campbell, and they've got a company called Profit Well, which was also known as Price Intelligently. And they're at about 10 million a year right now. And Patrick's often talked, and he mentioned that at times it would be wonderful to be content or happy with a high 6-figure, really easy type of leverageable business. You see a lot of these guys, selling products through Amazon, their own private label products that are pulling down $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, working 5-10 hours a week. It's, you hear that and you think, okay, with a $10 million a year business, there's a lot of obligation that happens that you're talking about. There's a lot of pieces in that puzzle. And so you said most business owners, they're just looking to be excited on Monday, to be happy about their business and that legacy. Have you seen that depending on that vision they have is the type of business that they actually want to have? Meaning, the clearer they are, they might realize, hey, they're just happy with a small hometown business versus actually wanting to have a huge $50, $100 million company.
We get a number of that. We also get a number of the guys and ladies that look at their situation and realize that they might be in the wrong business with what they're doing, because they realize they got into this business because it could make money. But they also realize that I'm making a lot of money, but I'm not keeping a lot of money. And so it's not serving some of my end goals of giving to the things that I want to be able to give to. Not just money, again, time, influence, relationships, those sorts of things. So we don't find that as much. What we do find, though, is exactly what you've stated, is people will get to a certain growth goal and go, you know what, I don't mind growing, but I want to grow at like 2 and 3%. Not really interested growing at 50%, because 50%, 100%, 300%, 38%, that comes with a lot of headaches. And you've got to be able to manage those headaches. Now, some people want that. They want to grow it because they want to sell it. And that's a different story at that point. They're willing to manage the short-term headaches for a couple of years in order to get it set up to sell. But most people, what they want to do is they want to create a nice business that serves well, that provides people with opportunities to leverage their skill set, that gives them an opportunity to do the things that they want to be able to do, that they've got in their heart to be able to do. And coming through this process of articulating with clarity their vision and then getting in their delegation roadmap, it delivers the ahas to go, oh, okay, I got it. Now they also realize I got to double down and continue to put in more work. So I've got to build systems for these people that I want to delegate to. I've got to build process that they can follow. I've got to build metric. You mentioned Profit Well. I know they do a lot of dashboard stuff. I've got to identify and articulate these metrics so that we can track these things, so I can pass these things off to other people.
So I want to dive down a thread that you mentioned, because I haven't really heard much of this on podcasts, and I think it'll be valuable for our listeners. And that is when a person, a business owner, has an awakening moment where they realize it might not be the business for them. Like they might not enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And so if that goes to your fourth principle, the business product or service type, what does that dialogue look like when you're having that with business owners? When it clicks and they're saying, I don't think this is the business I should be doing.
You know, it's interesting, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, Spencer, but where we have them go right back to is their vision story. And we tell them not to write your vision story. Don't articulate it in a way that your uncle would articulate it for you or a way that your mom would articulate it for you. Don't do what they wanted you to do. Write down what you see. And at the aha of this business, we've had a number of people. This happens, in fact, the majority of the time. They'll write down a vision, and then we'll start to implement delegation and team meetings and job roles and org charts and process roadmaps and all of the things that we need to do foundationally for the business. They'll get 60% down the road and go, I don't like my vision. I don't like where I wanted this to go. And so we'll have them come back and tweak. We tell people that your vision is only ever 90 to 95% complete anyway, because it's always something that we're going to tweak. The reason is because as we grow up, we gain wisdom and we get more information. And so today I could tell you that the Gamecocks are probably going to lose to Clemson. Well, if I find out in 3 or 4 weeks that Clemson's lost, all of their starting lineup on the offense, I've got new information now. And so my vision looks different. I hope that happens. Not really. But anyway, my vision looks different because I've got new information. And so in this vision, it's only ever 90 to 95% complete because as life happens, we get new information. And we see things from a different perspective just because of experience and wisdom.
We're going to dive even deeper into that delegation roadmap because our goal is to set you up for success. One of the things that I live by is called it's not how, but who, meaning finding the right people. Well, Scott is going to explain how you can record your processes and what you can do so you set people up for success. He's also going to talk about practicing the mindset and practicing the patterns like the sports world, but applying that into the business world. So let's jump into that right now. What does the delegation roadmap and template look like to you? And how do you begin to help people see that vision and implement it?
Yeah. So if you go back, those 5 areas, write down all the tasks, rank them in those 4 areas: time, how delegatable is it? What does it do to your energy level? And then how much is it costing you or costing the business to be able to do that task? And so the first thing that we have people to do is go back to their calendar and set an hour free and clear. And I know it sounds overly simplistic, but the thing I cannot stress enough, Spencer, it's amazing what happens when we block an hour. Cal Newport's got a whole movement on this in his deep workbook. And so when we block that time and really drill down, then what happens with that is it's very mechanical at that point. We can go through, we can pick the task on that delegation roadmap that are down arrows because they suck the life out of us. They are number 3s, easily delegatable, because the number 1 is something that only we can do. There shouldn't be many of those. So we get down arrow, number 3s that we spend a lot of time on. And if we got tasks, which inevitably you do, you've got a task that are a down arrow, 3, you spend a lot of time on, means it's cost you a lot of money. Then you look at that and we take that one task, not all of them, not 10 of them, just one. We take that one task and we process that task. So for instance, if it's I just go back to invoicing. If it's invoicing and you realize you're doing 2 hours of invoicing per week, it's costing you $400 a week at minimum of $200 per hour. It sucks the life out of you, and somebody easily could do that. And so $400 a week times 4 weeks a month, and now all of a sudden we're up to $1,600 a month that this is costing you, not to mention you actually have to put in the time. So that time is not available either for you to be able to work on the higher level things. So what we're going to do is the next time you go do invoicing, you're going to use a screen capture tool. You'll hit the record button. You'll do your invoicing while you're actually doing your invoicing. It's what we call the systems mindset, is do it while you're doing it. Just capture it. Don't try to set aside a time to go process invoicing. Just do it the next time you do it. Hit the record button. You've got your video there. Then you follow, we've got a whole hiring process, but you follow the hiring process to find the right person for the right role, for the right mission at the right time. And you merge that process with that person, and then leverage your team meetings, which you're going to have a conversation with somebody on this podcast later on. You leverage your team meetings because that's a hub of communication, and you hand off that process to that person within the team meetings and have that as follow-up. Now, that's a lot that I just said, but that's the work. That's the work that it's going to take for you to be able to delegate. If you don't do that, what we're doing is we're abdicating and not delegating.
Okay. Help our listeners understand that by the abdicating. And obviously that means not giving someone all of the tools in the toolbox, not relinquishing full responsibility to both parties. But how do you see that? How can people overcome that problem?
Yeah, so we bias towards abdication. And the difference is abdication is mainly just saying, hey, here, do this. Do this. Hey, have you ever done this? Yeah, I've done that. Okay, here, do this. QuickBooks is the best example. Hey, have you ever done QuickBooks? Yeah, I've done QuickBooks. Okay, I want you to start doing my QuickBooks. And that's the extent of the training. That's abdication. It's irresponsible, by the way. It's very, very irresponsible, and it's hurtful to the other person. You're not setting them up for success. Delegation, on the other hand, is to where we take a process, we identify the process, we then process the process, so it's actually documented or capture it. Then we pass off that process, monitor, pass off, monitor, pass off, monitor. It's not a one-time pass off, but it's a pass off, how you doing? Pass it off, tweak it, how you doing? Pass it off, tweak it, how you doing? Sports gets this right, by the way. Football practices 5 days a week and plays 1 day a week. Business, we get this wrong. We play 5 or 6 or 7 days a week and we never practice. And so in order to delegate, we've got to have a practice mindset. You don't have to practice 5 days a week, but you got to have a practice mindset. And as a coach, you become that position as a coach to your team to be able to capture the process, pass it off, rinse and repeat.
Now, what about for the business owners that just don't think that way? There's a lot of different personality tests, some ways that people think. Some of our listeners have heard of the Kolbe tests.
Yeah.
And that'll list out, some people are really high quick starts. Mm-hmm. So they think best in the moment and they just don't think system-minded, where there's other people that live and breathe in the weeds and they love putting the systems together. So how do you find a balance between those two worlds?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things that we have to do. Number one, Spencer, as I think through this, is just because a certain task requires me to think a certain way doesn't mean that I'm removed from that task. I don't like that the fact that the IRS takes as much taxes as they do. But just because I don't like it doesn't mean that I get to relinquish myself from that. And so what I've got to do is I've got to work within their system. And so if a business owner doesn't think like this, then they have the responsibility of finding other people who do and empowering them to get this done. If they don't, it becomes irresponsible on my part as the business owner, because business operates under principles. It doesn't operate under opinion. Business operates under principles and not, God, I wish it did it this way. When it comes to business, there is a marketing principle. There are sales principles. There are operational principles. There's administrative principles, regardless of how a person thinks. And so it's our responsibility as business owners to find the right people for those right scenarios within those personalities. I'm a huge fan of personality profiles. We will not offer hiring advice to anybody who's not done a personality profile. We use DISC, but any of them, we love Kolbe, we love DISC, we love the Myers-Briggs, all of those, because we want to find the right people. And so as a business owner, it is your responsibility. If you don't think that way in terms of systems and processes, then you've got to bring a person in-house to be able to help you think that way.
I fully agree with you. My Colby, and my listeners may know, but I'm a 3-2-10-3. So I'm a 10 quick start, which is like unheard of for the most part. But when I owned my software company, I had to put on the systems hat. I had to screen capture, as you mentioned. I had to do the stuff that I didn't want to do. I had to turn into a different person for that time being. And then I set the reward of, I'm going to be done with this task, and now I can work on the creative, the other growth stuff that I actually want to do. So you're spot on. I think oftentimes a lot of people want to abdicate their responsibilities, or just almost treat it like bills that come in, and hey, if I don't look at it, it's not real. And that's how you sabotage a business, not grow a business.
Yeah, I agree. No, we've got to, part of owning a business is that responsibility. It's no different than being a dad or a mom. It's great to have kids, but you got a lifetime of responsibility that comes with that. So,
we've kind of, touched a lot of different subjects, somewhat esoteric in the way of vision. And I know depending on our listeners, some of us may not want to hear the things that are up in the clouds. But that's also what inspires this next generation. If any of us on this podcast have employees that are millennials, and I'm generally speaking, so I'm speaking in terms of generality, but they're more motivated by vision than profit. So that doesn't mean that you can't pay them well, but they're very motivated by the purpose of the business. So for any of you listeners that are saying, I hate this kind of stuff, get over it. It's really important, but it's also important to delegate, as you were talking about.
Yeah.
The last question I love to ask is, what should I have asked you that I didn't cover in this conversation?
Spencer, I feel like we talked about the scope of foundational principles as a small business, a next step of where to start, articulate your vision. I don't know that it's necessarily a question you didn't ask. I think it's more of a fact of doubling down on what we talked about, and that is implementation. There's a great guy named Joe Calloway, wrote a book called Magnetic, and he says, vision without implementation is hallucination. Vision without implementation is hallucination. And so I think the kind of a parting encouragement is for business owners to get your calendar out, turn your notifications off, sit down, do the hard work, what Seth Godin calls the emotional labor. Your hands aren't going to get sweaty. You're not going to get dirty, but emotional labor is different. It's that feeling you feel at 3:00 in the afternoon where you just have to crash because your mind's spent. That's emotional labor. And to sit down, and even if you're not the person, say, well, I'm not the guy that thinks that way. You have to think that way for a small period of time. And then you have to impart that to other people. And do that on a repetitive basis. So, Spencer, that would be my kind of parting encouragement: is do the work, put in the work.
I love it. That is awesome. Maybe could possibly be the title of this episode. We'll see. I love it. So, for our listeners, I think they're going to get a lot of value out of this conversation today, and I'd love for them to follow up with you to say thanks and to be able to get in touch with you. What's the best way to do that?
Oh, thank you, Spencer. We've actually taken our entire vision tutorial and template, and we just put it online for free. I found that when we talk about this, in order to make it very pragmatic, you mentioned esoteric, so to make it very pragmatic, if you're willing to go to your calendar and set aside the time, you can go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision. So mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision, and the entire 20-minute tutorial is there. And the 7-category template is right there. And literally you put your email address and boom, it'll pop right up. There's no, you don't have to wait a week or anything like that. It's just right there, and you can get started right away and you can do the work.
Perfect. Okay, listeners, and we'll make sure to put that link in the show notes. So all you have to do is swipe up and then click that fancy button. Scott, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to talk with someone that's got integrity, talk with someone that understands that sometimes you just have to do the things that you don't really want to do. Maybe the things that don't look like growth, it's the iceberg type of stuff. But then once you do it, you're so grateful 6 months, 3 months, or 9 months, 12 months down the road, whatever that could be. So I thank you for that conversation today. And I hope our listeners will swipe up, take a look at that link, grab that roadmap, and implement something that will help their business.
Spencer, thank you. Thank you again for putting this together and let me be a part of it with you.
Thanks. Listeners, thank you so much for spending time with us today on the podcast. You can go to Scott's site at mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision and check out the valuable resources he has. Again, I'm not an affiliate. I'm not compensated. I'm just having these interviews to help you. Hopefully this helps out today. And the best thing that you could do is hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, share it with someone, and comment. Let us know what you guys think. Thank you for spending time with us today.